Welcome everybody. My name is Daan Roggeveen. I'm the curator of the public program here at the University of Hong Kong Shanghai Study Center. And this is already the 5th lecture in the series Down to Earth. And I'm extremely excited to announce our speaker of tonight, Professor Wen Jiajun. When we started this program on, let's say, the countryside in China, we had immediately a couple of names in mind, and one of them was straight away Professor Wen. He is, as Oning already mentioned in his first lecture, the first person who really understood the impact of the urbanization in China on the countryside. Over the past 30 years, he's been doing extensive research on rural issues in China. He's the executive dean of the Institute of Advanced Studies for Sustainability, the director of the Institute of Rural Finance, and director of the Center of Rural Reconstruction at the Renmin University in China. And he also serves as the executive dean of the Institute of Rural Reconstruction of China at the Southwest University in Beijing. And Professor Wen, we're really happy that he's here because we just discussed over dinner his travel schedule. He's just coming from Hangzhou and he's flying out to Korea tomorrow morning. Came from Shanghai, then tomorrow it's Korea, then it's 2 days Korea, then it's back to Hangzhou for another conference. So he sort of fitted this lecture in the crazy schedule that he's still doing. And we're really looking forward to hear his lecture on the costs of crisis and how it's sort of fired back at the countryside. Over dinner we already discussed a little bit the 8 crises that urban China has suffered and how it's sort of firing back on the countryside. I won't spend any more details on it because Professor Wen is the person to talk about this. Give a big hand for Professor Wen Jiajun.
Yeah, we just talked about the 8 crises in China during the 60 years modern Chinese history. I said that cyclical crisis is very popular in a lot of countries. But the problem is how to make soft landing. I said that every time Chinese crisis got the soft landing, it's exactly the transfer out the cost from the urban to the countryside. In the end, the crisis got soft landing in the urban area. And the cost turned to the rural issues. That is why China can gain the high growth and then to be the industrialized country. We can see that China now is one of the top 10 industrialized countries, and maybe the top 1, because the total amount of the industrial GDP and it's 2 times the US. And then it's a whole of other industrialized countries. So China equal to US equal all other industrialized countries. I mean, if you calculate by PPP. So, and here is the shares of the total amount of the top 10 industrialized countries. But it's maybe caused by China became only one developing countries to gain the industrialization. China now became very threat to others. It's popular pictures now in Western media. I just take some pictures to show that if China invests into the science and technology, means that we've got a big army in science and technology. And then here it certainly is also military threats. There, China invested into Africa, also made other investors think that it's a threat. So many talking about China's threats. But it's exactly from the Cold War, and that is ideology from Cold War. Indeed, let me tell you that China now can still keep very good relation with US and with other Western countries because China have a double contribution. First, is that this lower one, you can see that it's a manufacturing production and also the natural resources. That is, most of these developing countries, they contribute to Western countries. And then to make big trade deficit. But the very interesting phenomenon is that the more trade deficits can make the more capital surplus. By what? By financial services. And by this, such kind of financial globalization, and China transfer out large amount of physical products and then take back the paper currency. And then this paper currency cannot use in China because China only uses the local currency, and so China uses a large amount of this trade surplus as a foreign reserve, reinvest into the American Treasury bond market. But China now is the biggest one of American Treasury bond holders. But nobody, even in China, nobody believes that America can pay back. They only think that if we are lucky, they can pay back the interest. So that is means that we have a double supply. Supply the physical products and then supply capital investments. So now China became the top one FDI country in US. Means China contributes too much investments in US capital markets. And then to help the financial capital center enlarge their financial bubble. But inside, here, first one is that the lower income of the laborers, and to make the social chaos, and then also destroy the environment, make the very big issue in local. So that is unfair. Nobody can change. That is a real global crisis. Here, I said there's maybe not only one, not only one problem. That you can see 55% of export from China created by foreign invested enterprises. Means that you may know also another phenomenon is very important. 2/3 of the Chinese industrial system is controlled by transnational companies. So not only that you have a double supply, you supply the physical products, and also that large amount of your industry in local is exactly controlled by transnational companies. Means by foreign capital, not by local capital. So that's such kind of phenomena is very popular in these so-called industrialized countries in the world. So then you may know that it's not only that, but also if you look at the whole of the industrial structure, you may know that China is now at the bottom of the smiling curve. So these are different smiling curves, means that from the low industry to high industry, in the high-tech industry, whatever, the producer still be in lowest profit level at the bottom. And then the high profits are controlled by transnational companies outside. So that is the developing country's situation. So what is the global situation? Global situation still be divided into the advanced country and disadvantaged country, no matter you gain your industrialization or not. Here is one way read the whole world situation. I think Chinese scholars also are very careful to read the data in the different phases. I mean, the first phase that they think after the Second World War, you may know that the Western countries' real industry, I mean real economy, means a physical economy, decreased, caused by the social cost increase. In the end, most of these Western countries' industry, in physical production, move out. And then they more rely on the financial industry or financial economy. And that is why from the fullest and the highest regime of accumulation to the neoliberal regime of accumulation. So the reaccumulation by financial system. So that is a big difference. And since the 1980s, nowadays, caused by the much bigger crisis in 2008 in financial There's a financial turmoil in Wall Street. One by another, from United States and then to Europe and then to Japan. These are three major advanced economy, all have QE, and then turn to super QE. You know that QE means that you enlarge you issue more paper money. That is QE. And then another side, you issue more the treasury bonds. And then you use the money to buy the bonds. And then to make the bonds have a high price. And then you use the bonds to give the other fifth product countries like China. And then solve the problem in financial countries and transfer out the inflation to the fifth product country. I don't think that everybody can be very easy to understand such kind of contradiction. So maybe you can know that here is when you have a QE, and especially the social QE, you have a low interest rate in inflation. Means that the QE can have a large amount of the investments. Investments not inside of the QE country, like the United States. Large amount of this liquidity flow out. So if you calculate, I can see that more than 60% of the money, the paper money, flow out. One side is that by these institutional investments going to the future markets to make the green, the market's price, green market price, oil market price increase. You can see that originally it's $40 per barrel oil, now increased to the 140, 3 times higher than before. And then green markets, if you read the data of the future market of green, you can see that 100% increment. The more you invest into these markets, your money invest, the more, and then the higher the price increase. And then by that, make the inflation up from the Western countries, make the inflation turn to these fifth production country, like China, because China needs to import large amount of oil, also need to import the grain, and like India, they need to import the coal resources, or input the oil and input the grain. Most of these physical production countries need to input more, and then the prices increase, means that they input inflation. So input inflation means that you need to higher your local capital price, because the bank rate need to increase. The high inflation means that you cannot make low bank rate. You need to increase bank rate, means that your enterprises need to take the high cost investments. So then it's a big chance for overseas investments. Because you have a low interest investments, you can go abroad, especially to this industrialized country, and then you can take the share when you buy, okay? You buy the share, and then to be the controller of these countries' industries. So by such kind of the computation, the financial part take more benefits from such kind of global system. And then to make the world physical economy become more and more difficult, not only because of the higher capital investments, the high cost of the investments, but also because of these countries' industries, the profit decrease, and then the local capital out of this fixed production, and then turn to the real estate investments, and then to make the real estate investments means that the more you invest into the real estate, the high price of the apartments in different cities, and then large amount of the enterprises lower their profits, even zero profits. So they are going to bankrupt. So that is a very serious situation now in coastal China. A lot of people think that now coastal China will still be high growth, but it's not true. A lot of low profits enterprises move on, move to Vietnam, Burma, or to Bangladesh. They cannot stay in such kind of high cost area. So that is and then to make a lot of unemployment problem. So that is the world situation. So that is also why many big institutional investors, they believe that China will be next country perhaps. So the China threats turn to China perhaps. That is there's no difference. If you believe that the China threat, also will believe that China will be perhaps. Because there's even no profits in the industrial productions. So that is the problem. Nowadays, there's another problem. I don't want to say that it's a threat, but there's another problem. But most of these media, no matter it's international or domestic, all believe that China should turn to the political system reform. They said, okay, Chinese political regime is bad enough. We need to change. But never tell them that if you turn to Western countries' political system, you need to pay much higher cost. Like Germany Premier, it's Madame Merkel. She said that our Europeans, we have 7% of world population. We make 23% of the world GDP, but we pay 50% of the world social expense. So can we make sustainable? It's a no way. And then, if you read this social expense, you can know that the Western countries themselves need to issue more debts to make the social system and the political system keep going. But if China turns to Western countries' social system or political system, China nowadays still be low cost. And if they change, that will be more high cost. So that is even our intellectuals, we all believe that we need to have such kind of advanced political system. Democracy and freedom and liberalism, whatever, is all beautiful. And nobody calculates how much is the systematic cost if you want to change. It's not only the problem with West Europe, but also the problem with the United States. And then also the problem with India and other so-called BRICS countries. I just came back from India. I said the formal sector in India cannot contribute enough revenues, tax to the governments. So the governments only can cover the formal sector in India. And 92% of Indian employed by informal sector. So the gray area is much bigger in such kind of country. Even they have very perfect and maybe more advanced than China in political regime. But they cannot solve the problem. They cannot develop a formal sector. And because only the formal sector can contribute enough revenues to the government tax system. So there's so many contradictions in developing countries. China should be very careful. Even we want to change, we need to calculate how much is the cost. That is one. And then means that 100 years, generation by generation, Chinese intellectuals and the politicians all want to learn the Western model. No matter 1930s, it's a Republic of China, or the 1950s to now, it's a People's Republic of China. We all want to set up the Western system. And we don't have the precondition, that's colonization. I should give you a new concept. You need to treat the whole Asia continent as an indigenous population continent. Means that the Asian people have no way to send out their population to another continent. Not like Europe, they send many people to so-called New World and then to Australia. So European people occupied 4 continents, North and South America, and Australia, and Africa. And then transfer out large amount of the population, and then very much improve the relationship between population and the natural resources. And then so you can have very much advanced system. But this indigenous continent like Asia, like China, India, almost impossible. Give you an example. You know that in Ireland, you know how many population overseas is Irish? How many know? You may know. Maybe that you know better now.
60 million.
50 million overseas Irish and 5 million local. Means 10 times overseas Irish than the domestic Irish. So if you calculate others, maybe similar. How many overseas Chinese? How many local? Local is you know, the 1.34 billion. Overseas, okay, similar as Irish, 50 million. So if you know the data, I mean that you may not so hurry to push China going forward. Okay, if you Chinese hate it, just slow down. These pictures just shows that in 1930s, when the 1930s in Western countries you have a big problem, that's overproduction, and then turn to the economic crisis, and then turn to the Second World War. And these things, I think, it's a very big lesson to our Oriental people. Nowadays, the most critical issue in China is what? Overproduction. Similar as 1920s, 1930s. In 1930s, most of these European countries cannot cover such kind of overproduction as the crisis, and then turn to war. And then China got more severe problem as an overproduction. Can China go into war? No way. But China turned to the inland construction, like Roosevelt. So if you want to know the Chinese local policy, and then you can compare with Roosevelt in 1930s. Similar. But maybe that you have a knowledge in American 1930s much better than I. I know that in that time, Roosevelt turned to the overproduction is a big surplus of industrial capacity to the inland construction. And then to make the United States just jump up from 1930s big crisis. And then the other one, there's just 2 countries can solve the problem of overproduction. One is Roosevelt's United States. Another one, I suppose you know, Germany. I don't want to mention his name, but anyway, these are 2 guys. I mean, these 2 presidents or 2 leaders, they the same. Turn the big surplus of industrial capacity to the inland construction. The Germans at that time, in the 1930s, built up the whole country's highway system. Much improved the transportation. And then that is why Second World War, German army beat up others. because they can concentrate the army force in one day by highway system in Germany. So that is a historical event. We don't want to talk too much. And nowadays, you can see that when China got very severe challenge of overproduction, that is happened in 1998, caused by 1997 East financial turmoil. You know, East Asian financial turmoil happened in 1997. Young people may not know. A middle age, maybe all know that there is a very big bad impact in 1997 caused by financial turmoil in East Asian area. And China got even nothing to export. So then from 1998, China turned the big industrial capacity into the inland construction from 1998. So that is similar as 1930s Roosevelt in the United States. Okay, so here, let me tell you what is China. When we talk about this so-called crisis, why rural China can make the crisis soft landing? Because the land revolution. Land revolution make almost all rural households gain the historical aim, that is Taylor's rights. Caused by the Cold War ideology, Taylor's rights in name is a communist system. But in China, that's thousands of years. Every time new dynasty, new king or new emperor, all need to carry out Taylor's rights as a basic policy of the new country. So it's a thousands of years historical policy. No matter you give the name as a communism or feudalism, that is a Western philosophy. In China, it's just a history. So in the 1949, China carried out Taylor's right to every rural people. Equal distribute the land. Understand me? Equal distribute land to every household. The cost by that to make the low class, China have a low class. The low class not landless. The low class is a PD ruler. Understanding that is a small landholders means that they do have some little properties, so they became PD ruler. And then the low class now from that time until now, the low class in China all have 100% private house. It's low class? Yes, it's low class. 100% have the land. Means that the family can be survived by the little properties. Little properties is given by the land erosion. Land erosion is joined by the low class. They are peasants. So from that time, the problem is that if you insist equal district land to every rural household, means that you cannot set up a big farm. So big farm means that if you have no big farm, you cannot take the big farm agricultural surplus for the industrialization. Means that you block this country's industrialization. So the land erosion is good for low class, but land erosion equal district land not good for industrialization. That is why when we have a dinner with Diane, I said that the first impact from urban to countryside is that when urban want to carry out the primitive accommodation for the national industrialization, they need to take the surplus from agriculture, but when they're facing the thousands of these scattered small households, the transition cost, the highest in the world. And then the Chinese took a kind of policy to set up 4 million co-ops, to make 400 million rural people join these 4 million co-ops, and then reduce the institutional cost for the primitive accommodation of national industrialization. Others you can see that other developing countries, no matter how many population, they don't have such kind of measures. So the Chinese, the first measure to deal with the problem of industrialization is the primary population. China cannot take the resources from overseas, cannot send the warships to other continents. They only can take surplus from the local people, from peasants, from the rural society. How? If scattered the way, so then they set up the co-op. And also, because of the ruling party facilitates the land revolution, so almost mobilize all rural people join the land revolution. So China is a country for almost the majority. All join the revolution means that you mobilize the majority join your state building. When you talk about the political regime, you may know that the Chinese, that is in the developing countries, is maybe the largest percentage were mobilized by the revolution. You know, the rural people is 88% in 1949. So it means that almost 90% of people in this country mobilized to join the revolution for piece of land and for their house. But they were totally mobilized, so that is more easier to set up a country political regime by many people, large number of the people join this state group. So that's why when they have the big challenge, others maybe not easy to mobilize people to join your program. But China is more easy to mobilize people to join the program. That is why the second problem happened is when China can produce large tractor cannot be accepted by its small household and small co-op, and then China set up the collective. That is 1955 and 56. People say that is left wing. I said no, not left. That is right. Why I said this is right? It's right wing. It's because this one is exactly for the national industrialization capital. Industrial capital need to send their tractors to the countryside and then take big surplus back. So the people's commune system also that's followed is because the Soviet Union stopped facilitates Chinese industrialization, and then China needs to set up the so-called self-reliance and hard struggle for continued industrialization, and then they set up the people's commune. And then people's commune set up these township levels, 5 kinds of small business or small industries, facilitate the agriculture, and then to make the local industrialization continue. That is the Chinese way for the industrialization. In the first page, I show that China is now the top 1 country of these 10 industrialized countries. But how China gains such kind of an outcome? By what? How China passed the primitive accumulation? Still be the question. Few people answered. So that is why I then emphasize that I published a new book in the name of 8 times crisis in modern China. And this book now is very much accepted in Chinese scholar society and even the pop. Redescribe, not in ideology, not for mainstream, and we just are trying to be very objective to summarize what's real experiences in modern China. So that is I'm trying to give a very simple description of this modern history. And then you can see that up to now, why China is so much stable than other developing countries, because we have 2 injection pyramid. This one is economy, this one is a social structure. So that's one. Up to now, we have almost 200 trillion physical assets. Means that I think it's very easy. If you originally maybe you have an apartment, it's
low price. But if subway set up station in front of the building, and then your apartment price increase. Yeah. So because of China have a large amount of investments and then turn this big industrial capacity into the infrastructure construction inland. So to make the inland natural resources, the natural physical assets increase their price. Means that the total amount of the physical assets enlarge. But now the natural physical assets 100 trillion. Industrial physical assets another 100 trillion. So it's the basic level. And then the middle level is that cost by you invest, you need to issue more paper money that's local. That is why China still insists on the not free convertible, because China needs to use their own money to monetize their own natural resources. Understand me? Because the tax of the money means that if you issue money means you have a Tobin tax. So the governments issue more paper money, monetize their natural assets or physical assets means that they monetize and then they take a lot of the interest. That's the Tobin tax. So by such kind of control their own money system. Nowadays this Chinese yuan cannot be free convertible because the Chinese government need to finish their monetization. If China allow other countries' paper money flow in and then free to buy Chinese physical assets, means that you're lost. This economic theory, I think that maybe not easy to understand. But if you go to Russia, when 1991 Soviet Union collapsed, I was there to do my observation. I found that when their political regime collapsed, immediately their money system collapsed. And then large amount of foreign currency flowed into Russia, for the Soviet Union, and then take large amount of the profits by monetized natural resources and even the physical assets. So it's a big loser by such kind of reform. And then I came back, gave a report. At that time, I was that time a policy researcher in central governments. So I do my observation and then come back with the report. Said we need to accelerate our domestic monetization. Try to avoid the Soviet Union's problem, because Soviet Unions still be in the physical production, never monetized. They never issue more paper money. And then so originally 1 ruble can equal $3. But when they collapse, $1 can exchange 4,800 rubles. A big change. So from 1990s, you know that from 1992, China started to accelerate in monetization. And then RMB yuan from 1992 that is the first year money to money. Money can be money. Before that, no. Before that, we have other system. Everything you need to have vouchers. So money is not money. So from 1992, money is money. That is just 20 years ago. So this China take a big lesson from Soviet Union and then change with accelerated monetization, and then up to now we have 150 trillions financial assets. And then you put this together, you have 350 trillions assets, and then how much debts we have? 20 trillions. But debts still we can buy, can sell, and then it's assets. So we said up to now, China have a ejection pyramid, economic. Lower one is big and also enlarged. Big physical assets, and then financial assets, and then the debts assets. So then you can see this one, that is the social structure. Lower one, we said low class. Low class, almost 60% of the population is Chinese low class. They are pretty rural. 100% private house in countryside. In urban, maybe not. But in countryside, even they say they are poor. But anyway, they have a house. So we said, if you calculate their assets, they are not poor, not as poor as the low class in urban area. Maybe they are somehow rich than the low class in urban. So nowadays, a lot of people talk about hukou. As almost every foreigner can talk about hukou. But you may not know the most difficult change is that the most difficult thing is that if you want to change your hukou from urban to the rural, it's extremely impossible. But if you want to change your hukou from the rural to urban, it's possible. Now the high price, that is more higher price, is a hukou in countryside. Because if you do have a hukou in rural, in a village, means that naturally you have a right to share a piece of the construction land from the village, and then free to have a piece of land for their family survive. So that is why a lot of people talking about the comparative advantage in China. They said the low labor cost, how China make low labor cost. And large amount, more than 80% of the migrant laborers, they don't need you pay their security umbrella. You don't need to set up the security umbrella to these migrant laborers because they do have in their home village free distribute land, free distribute the land for the construction. And then also they have a medical system by the village collective, not individual. So if you are in the urban area, you pay by individual, but in the countryside, you pay by village. Means you pay zero. But you have a medical service and medical insurance. And then, so several security system in countryside, all low cost, lower cost than the urban people. So that is why a lot of people, they don't need, I pay you 80% and then you pay me 92%, you set up security umbrella for me. They said, no, I don't want to pay my 80%. 8, they don't pay. Even you enforce them to pay 8. When they quit, they want you to give him back. They go back to their home village. That is China. If you go to any developing countries, if these countries duplicate the Western system, any labor need to pay 1 plus 1. 1 is salary, another one is social security. But here, more than 80% don't need to pay the social security. So only pay 1 is salary. So that's why if you calculate the labor price nominally in the markets, much lower than China. But if you calculate the labor real cost, it's higher than China. That is why FDI won't going into India. Now FDI in India just less than 10% of China. Why? It's because of potentially the labor price in India higher than China. So a lot of things like that. If you just think about this different system, the Chinese system, they do have some potential advantage. That's because of the rural. So that's why I said the rural can internalize the externalities. When you have the externalities mainly caused by the urban industry, by urban capital, and then if you have no such kind of ability to hear more people, I mean, like 2009, you may know that there are, you know that in 2009 how much workers lay off in China. More than Europe. And then there is a social chaos like Europe. Let me tell you, 25 million workers lay off in 2009. That's the first quarter. 1 quarter. 25 million workers lay off. You can just imagine total amount in the United States when they very much emphasize the employment problem in the US. How much you know, just less than 500,000. They said 600,000 or something. Just a little. But they got very big issue, and then they occupy Wall Street, many things. But here, 25 million workers laid off. Where they gone? Because up to now, these very radical governments and radical politicians and radical intellectuals and radical enterprises, they haven't destroyed the rural China. Rural China still big. More than 50% of population still be in countryside. They still have theirs, even small, but they do have the problems. So by such kind of rural China, so China can internalize the industrial cost in urban area into the countryside. So I said, why China can have every time crisis soft landing? Because China have a big rural area, a large number of the rural people. So the rural people can help to absorb this cost, internalize the externalities, and then China can have soft landing, not by urban industry itself. So you may know there's a very popular word, no pains, no gains. Pains, not in these people, these interest group, they gain. Yeah, they gain the profits, but they don't stand the cost. So the cost transfer. That is the real experience. Maybe some people dislike such kind of describe, but anyway, you can challenge. And I don't want to say that natural resources are very limited. Yeah, but anyway, the less natural resources and then the faster industrialization means that the more pollution. So now China became the top one country as the top one country of industry and then top one country of the pollution. And that is caused by the fast industrialization and then fast urbanization and with very little natural resources. That is the problem. So here, not only the industry in the urban area, but also the rural. I mean, agriculture became more and more severe in pollution area. I mean, the area pollution means not by part area pollution. Agriculture play very important role, and because it's 67% or 57% all people come from the agriculture. So, and then also China and India, these two countries, they have a big surplus of labor resources, and then they input a lot of garbage from Western countries. So China, India, top one, top two, garbage in input countries. And also make even worse situation of the pollution. So also caused by the fast, I mean, if you accelerate the urbanization, large amount of population move to the cities, and then you need to consume more coal, and then the coal became became a major sector for the pollution. So that is the coal consumption. And here is the mega cities pollution. I mean, these days, if you read Chinese newspaper, you can find that Beijing is now become very, very severe in air pollution. And nowadays, almost 1/3 of the Chinese terror, especially its big city area, because the industrial hustle in big cities, so the city area have a more severe of the air pollution. Yeah, and big cities always have a very serious pollution. And now China trying to change their strategy. So let me summarize my analysis about new strategy. Just now I mentioned that since 1998, China got very serious overproduction as a crisis. From that time, the Chinese governments changed their strategy into the three-gap rebalance. let me repeat. Three gap rebalance. What is three gap? Coastal inland. Deng Xiaoping, when he took power, he said we need to make a part of China develop more fast than the others. And then some group people become richer than others. So that is his policy. And then 20 years later, 30 years later, the coastal area became more rich, and the inland China became very poor. So that is the first gap, is regional gap. Coast, inland is regional gap. Second gap is a rural area, rural China took too much cost from urban industry. So the rural became run out. So worn out means that rural situation became worse, and the rural people poor. So the second gap is a urban-rural gap. The third one, everybody knows, rich-poor gap. So we have a three big gap in large. When China got the challenge, you know that the crisis in China is we can cut two parts. Danger and opportunity. That is Chinese philosophy, like yin yang. And so the Chinese think that, okay, the late 1990s, that is a crisis. How China take this crisis into the opportunity? This is very dangerous. Yeah, you have overproduction. How can you make this danger into the opportunities? That is from Brunei's time. And the first is a regional rebalance. So then we got this 3.6 trillion Chinese yuan as an invest into the Western China. That is started from 1998. And then 2 years later, China initiated the second big program nationally. That is Northeast China. It's originally Soviet Union invest there. It's a very traditional industrial base, now worn out, bankrupt. And a large amount of the workers lay off, and then they need to regenerate. So more than 2 trillion investments flow to Northeast. And then the Northeast recovered, and then from 2003, the third one is a Middle China rising. So West China is a big investment. Northeast China, big investment. Middle China, big investment. Total amount is $1.2 trillion. It's big money. Think about Obama, and he has to solve the problems. He got $4 trillion, invest 90% flow to the financial sector. But in China, at that time, the crisis 10 years earlier in the United States. They deal with the crisis, they invest into the regional gap rebalance, so they get $1.2 trillion for different regions, but mainly for invest into the infrastructure construction. And then from 2003 to 2005, from 2005, China re-changed the strategy. That is second gap, this rural-urban gap. From 2005 to 2012, the total amount of the investments from the central and the provincial two levels into the countryside for infrastructure construction and also for social construction, $1.2 trillion. If you calculate the RMB yuan into dollars, okay, it's big money. So the first gap rebalance by $1.2 trillion, second gap rebalance by $1.2 trillion, that is about Chinese state. These are decades, late 1990s to now. So by such kind of big investments, especially big investment into the rural China, the rural village set up 5 communication. Maybe you cannot understand what is 5 communication. First, pavement road. Second, electricity. Third, water. Fourth, telephone, and then internet. 5 communication built up into the village. 99% of the village set up 5 communication. And then follow. Which sector can carry out fiber communication construction into the village? Private sector or public? State enterprises or private enterprises? I think the easy answer, private cannot. Because you build up the electricity into the countryside, into the village, you cannot take the return. If you households by households ask them to collect money, it's more difficult. And also, when the electricity transferred to the mountain area, to the village area, that is a large amount of electricity lost. So the cost will be much high. So the private sector never do that. They want to have a very regular return. So that is the only state sector they can carry out such kind of infrastructure construction. Also, the water system. Can you take enough money from this countryside from poor people? No. So what is the cost? The cost is institutional cost. Who can pay the cost? State. So by the treasury system, they sponsor, subsidize. That is why by these 12 years, even 13 years, even 15 years infrastructure construction investment, especially for the low return construction, the state-owned enterprises enlarge. Now, if you calculate the industrial facilities, state-owned enterprises take 73%, private only 27%. So that is why there are so many our intellectuals and newspapers, they give very serious critiques to the central policy, because the private smaller and smaller, and the public larger and larger. That is China. So, but maybe in next decades, private can enlarge. And next decades, no way. Because you keep investments, invest into the infrastructure construction. So the job only can be carried out by these big state-owned enterprises. That is the problem. So it's very real problem. But what is gain? When you large amount of investment into this infrastructure construction, there's no big return. But what is the gain? The gain is that when you facing the challenge of the global crisis, the gain comes. You know that I mentioned there are 25 million workers laid off by 2009 global crisis. It's very popular. 2009 global crisis everywhere, bad impact. And then there are 600,000 enterprises bankrupted, closed. In the end, means China need to. And what happened? Nothing. Because central changed one policy. Originally, Chinese central government subsidized its exports enterprises in coastal area, 13%. Means that Chinese government subsidized foreign consumers, 13% discount. But when the exports decreased, the overseas demand decreased, a lot of contracts abandoned. Many enterprises closed down. In the end, Chinese governments changed, gave us 13% as discount to one group, rural people. If you reject as a rural household, you have enjoy your 13% discount. Means that if you buy the color TV, refrigerator, and washing machine, and pickup, and the track, whatever, give you 30% discount. Until 2010, the end of 2010. So by such kind of policy, turn large amount of this export into the domestic demand. And then the rural people, they buy a lot of color TV and the refrigerator and the truck and whatever. They buy a lot of things. And because of before, you have built up the road, you have built up the electricity, you have built up the water and whatever. So they can use these modern products. But if you didn't, so fortunately, when Chinese this time facing the challenge of global crisis, they can do it, they can change. But if the Chinese, before that, if Chinese never invest into the countryside for the infrastructure construction, they have the same bad situation. So I said, 2009, China have a soft landing. By what? A large amount of investments before the crisis has invested into the rural infrastructure construction. That is why China can have the measures to deal with the global crisis. So if you read these measures, you may know that China got the challenge of the financial crisis not in 2008, 1997. Since 1997, China first found that we have the similar problem as the Western countries in 1929 to 1933. So we need to follow the Roosevelt policy. That is not just I said now. I said we have the report in the year 1998 to the central governments. Not I wrote, from Beijing University. They have done the research and then they compare the 1930s American policy, European policy, and then gave the suggestions to the central government that we only can learn from Roosevelt. So since 1998, China started investments by the government side for the infrastructure until now. Means 50 years investment drive the economic growth. Understand me? That is not a trick. That is just the measures. 50 years, not now. That is why I said when we have the similar problem in 2008, 2009, that is just the governments follow the original the measures, the policies. No difference, no change. Only one thing changed, that is change the subsidized overseas consumers, change to subsidize the rural consumers, and then change the overseas demand into the domestic demand. That is a global crisis and the Chinese measures. And then, long-termly, we can see that is China still have a long-term constraints. That's because the population still being increased. Until 2020, there will be 940 million labor resources, much bigger than other countries. If you have data, you can calculate your country, how many labor resources. In China, we will have 940 million labor resources. Have we created enough room for these 940 million laborers have a job? No way. So the only way, hold your rural China. Because the rural China is what? We said it's labor pool. Understand me? Rural China is labor pool. Urban China is capital pool. That is a rural urban. So rural play a very important role for maintain this surplus labor. If you, a lot of people ask me why that you always against accelerating urbanization. I said, it's not for me, it's for the country. If you destroy the rural China, it means that you will have no way for soft landing. There will be regular crisis. The crisis is regular. Must happen. Several years later, and there's another crisis. And then next one, a lot of people believe, because China have a big bubble now, not only real estate bubble, but also financial bubble and debt bubble. They have several bubbles. Now created. So a lot of investors, these are big institutional investors, they do analysis, they have a dialogue with you. They all believe that next must be China. So Japan, bubble break in 1990. East Asian, 1997. Russia, 2001. Argentina, 2001. Latin American and other countries in new century. And then finally turn to Wall Street. Now should be turned to China. A lot of people believe it. They only ask me that where's the trigger? They believe that there must be bubble break. But what is the trigger? I said, I don't know. But a lot of people do the prediction. I think that I'm not fortune teller. I just do my analysis. But anyway, the macro situation is not so possible. So only one thing I insist: maintain rural China, full soft landing. And then I give my personal suggestions to these friends. They are in the institutional investors. It's a big company. They ask me that how can I prevent myself from this crisis? I said, go into countryside. Join the agriculture, and then when the big crisis happens, at least you can have food. I said, you can have a Noah egg in countryside. No matter how rich you in urban area, when the crisis happens, whatever you have as money will be decreased. Like Russia, Argentina, Japan, Korea, a lot of countries, one by another, they all were defeated by financial crisis. Because financial capital is a big evil. You need to take too much. So, one by another. Next, maybe China, maybe not. But anyway, if our central authority take our suggestions, maintain rural China, maybe next time it still can be soft landing. Okay, I hope. Nowadays, the only one comparative advantage in China is that the government still have a very low debts. The percentage of the debts to GDP, China now is the lowest until next year, 2014. And a lot of people gave you data. Maybe the data is wrong. People talk about China need to pay another 40 trillion. It's a dynamic debts, the comprehensive debts. But it's dependable. If we continue to invest into the infrastructure construction, because inland China still be very large room for the construction. And then also that China now turn to the new Silk Road with mid Asian countries. So they also need large amount of investment for the infrastructure construction. So if you go to South Asia and then the West Asia, you can see that there is large amount of the area. They also need to invest into the infrastructure construction. So we think that we still have 20 years. So if anyone here is working for the institutional investors, I hope you keep your mind that is we still have a large room for the investment. But the problem is that we short of the natural resources. That is very easy to block China growth. So no matter it's a South China Sea or East China Sea, wherever, there is some accident that will be very easy to block. So inside China, we still have a very positive perspective. Outside, maybe not. So when we compare with Europe, you can see that why the European countries cannot recover by the crisis. It's because they have no room for the fiscal investments. Here is a European, that is the data from OECD. Now this minus means that whatever they have,
It's perfect. If you go to Europe, everywhere it's a highway, it's a fast train, whatever. There's no way for more room to absorb this surplus capital. But in China or in mid-west Asia, there's still large room for the investments. So I think that if European people would like to join, maybe that China, Europe can set up this big so-called continental bridge, past the mid-Asia and West Asia and then to the Europe. That is benefits to these countries. So if you calculate, then they know that along this land bridge, half of the population of the world and half of the world GDP is along this land bridge. So we need to have a new collaboration in such kind of infrastructure construction. Also invite Russia join this triangle. So by such kind of new geo strategy, you can have the room for almost all the countries in this big triangle in Russia, China, and Europe. That's from north to east to west, because the Euro-Asia is the biggest continental in the world. And then I said it's much bigger than the average. The population, the resources, and investments, and the industrial capacity, mainly concentrated in this Euro-Asian continent. So we have more confidence to believe that if we set up a collaboration, we may have another opportunity. Okay, and I will try to finish. Let me introduce some work we have done. And you know that I'm not only the researcher but also a doer. And there is a very big rural reconstruction movement that we facilitate. We are the resource persons who help such kind of rural reconstruction. You can see that because of rural people have a more and more rely on the non-farm income. So we need to give them more opportunities to organize our citizens to set up the bridge with the rural area, and then to give them more surplus, the urban surplus into the countryside. So that is we said deurbanization, mobilize the citizens going to countryside, and then to move the agriculture into the urban area. So we are trying to make the comprehensive relationship between rural and urban, not the difference, not to make the block, not to build up the wall between rural and urban. So whenever we have done these pictures to show that how many programs we gave to this rural reconstruction movement. Now this time, this one is also what we have done. We got these farmers markets in urban area. We set up these rural co-op products into the urban supermarkets. We organize a lot of trainings and conference for these peoples. We also help the migrant workers to set up a service center to help them to have self-organization and self-empowerment, and then to strengthen their position to negotiate with these interpolals. We also set up more than 100 village experiments, and some of you have visited our experiment zone in Jiangsu. Here is the first school we set up in Hebei province that is a free training for peasants, and then paid by our intellectuals. We are independent to pay the cost, not by governments, not by others. So we built up this eco-architecture. Here you have so many people interested in architecture. But here, these are helped by the Taiwan Architecture Office. They help to design and help for building this and organize the rural people to join these constructions. So that is the first architecture, eco-architecture group in rural China. We also have eco-toilets and not destroy any environment. We organize the citizens to join the social participatory urban farm. These are the people join these gardens. We also make the caves down to the earth. You have a down to the earth, that is we have many in suburban area to make these caves, go to the farm and then down to the earth. We also train a lot of young students, many hundreds. We train them and then they go to different cities to set up the citizen participatory farm in suburban area. Now, from the first one we set up in Beijing, it's more than 100 in different cities. So these are the young students. We organize them as volunteers teams, go to the countryside, help these scattered households organize, strengthen their power, and to be the co-ops. Here is also that we help these very radical to protest their rights. We organize a very big organization to fight the government sides. And then we said, okay, in both sides you can sit down, and then the governments gave subsidies, and then these cooperative lead this organization from the protest into the co-op. So now they change. So finally we are trying to regenerate our rural culture. So we said, love your home village. That is our new program. I hope that Shanghai people would like to join this new program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Han. This is really exciting, and I think for a lot of people it was also hard work to sort of keep up with your thoughts, at least for me. But I also have some questions, and I assume the audience also as well. So if you can join me for a minute here in front. There's a lot of questions that come to mind.
May I suggest that when we take questions, one girl, one boy.
Oh, that's great. That's a great suggestion, actually.
People already have one question.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, then I'm the boy, and I start with one question. And that is something that has been. Basically, what you're saying is we should maintain a base in the countryside when we want to have a sustainable development for China in the future. Now, currently the division of rural-urban is roughly 50-50 in China. Expectations are that in the coming 20 years...
It's official data.
That's official data, so it depends a little bit how you count also. Expectations are that in the coming 20 years, 300 million people will move from the countryside to the city. If the people in the countryside, how would you employ them? Because my guess is that food production will become more efficient, so there will be an increasing scale of farms and of food production, so less jobs. So what kind of jobs do you envision for young people, especially in the countryside?
Good question. How many years you are in China?
5 years.
One. It's good. It's long enough. And then the question means that you have understand a lot of Chinese situation. Very good question. Nobody can give enough job as a urban for these rural laborers. So that is why I said rural is a labor pool, and urban is a capital pool. And I said that the rural people in the countryside, in their village, they are not only working for the farm, for the agriculture. Originally, rural China is a multiple business. One big village, you may not know how big in rural China. The village size is almost 5,000 inhabitants or 6,000. It's a city. So certainly there's a big population size, there's a village. They have many different business. They have a lot of stores, they have workshops, they have even the factories, many things in the village. Originally, if the government's policy very much pro the urban capital, they have a lot of good policy to urban capital, and certainly they take too much surplus from the countryside. So you cannot develop your rural business. But nowadays, if we do want to maintain the rural society, you turn your policy, you benefit the rural business, certainly that the rural people can have a cash income by the rural business. So originally rural is a multiple business, not only the agriculture. So a lot of intellectuals, they argue that how can you make these migrant workers, they go back to the farm work? I said, no way, you don't want to go back to the farm. They also don't want to go back to farm. They want to what? They want to go back for small business. That is why I very much emphasize rural people, they are pretty rural. They don't want to be the working class. We don't have 19th century's European experiences. You have a class struggle by capital class and the working class. But up to now, we even have a 300 million migrant laborers. Most of them, they are still belong to pretty rural class. So they don't join the working class struggle.
So basically what you're saying is the division is not that black and white, that people in the city only work in the service industry and in the countryside they only work the land. There is a gray area where people in towns, smaller cities and smaller bigger villages are also running businesses, industries, etc., etc.
I think that it's more easy to set up the policy. You just name it's a big population size village of town.
Yeah.
Originally they are in name of village. So they cannot have the tax, they cannot have a revenue. All things, all these surplus, they contribute to the governments. And then governments take this surplus into the city, and then for the city construction. And then to make the city price, reprice the rural productivities. That is old, traditional, I cannot say worse, but it's not good policy. If you do want to make balance, you need to turn your policy to benefit the rural people. And then you may change such kind of situation. Thank you. Anyway, it's a good question.
A girl with a question. Oh, there you go.
Could you talk a bit about the taxes in China? I've been asked very often how that works and how do you see do taxes go to the central government from rural places and in the future then as well?
It's also a very good question. The taxation system is a very key issue in any country. Let me tell you that China now have this time I can say that it's a bad tax system. Because 92% of the tax the common people and enterprises. It's an indirect tax. And then only 7% is a direct tax. Means that how much assets you have, and then you pay tax. How much income you have, you pay tax. Means that rich people, they live. Poor people, pay more. That is tax system. And then pay by individual. Even I'm a professor, I have many income anyway. But I never pay the tax by myself. The income tax means direct tax, paid by my university, by my working unit. So that is the problem of tax system. And originally, the rural people they are not only contribute to the urban industry, but they need to pay the tax for the public management, for the government's consumptions. That is originally. Since 2006, all the agricultural tax eliminated. So nowadays, the rural people, they don't pay tax. Not pay the direct tax, but the indirect tax is still paid. So originally, if the government's not eliminated the agricultural tax, the rural people pay much higher than the urban. They pay more than 30%. That is almost the highest burden to the farmers in the world. So now we change that way. We benefit the rural people that way, but not whole. So that is why I always want to change the policy to make real balance to the rural society.
A boy at the back.
I don't need the microphone. You know, people talk a lot about finances and economics. They talk about you know, state assets, concentration of wealth, etc. But very few people talk about reform in education. How do you see reform in education playing a role in the shifting of the focus to rural kind of rural development?
Many thanks. And because that you know, maybe you don't know. I said I'm a doer in the rural reconstruction movement. Means that we invest by ourselves for regenerate the local education for rural people and also for rural regeneration. The whole of the national education system is that to take the labor resources for the industrial capital. Means that they need to join the systematic, that is a system, the systematic education from the primary school until the university. So all the knowledge be standardized by such kind of education. It's no good. But nobody can change because China now still be in the industrialization era. We are trying to change this historical era. We want to set up a new era that is an eco-civilization announced by central leaders. But indeed, because all of these local governments all want to set up an industrial zone, want to absorb industrial investments. So they need labor, all labors, applied industry. That is why they standardize knowledge, give no room for the local knowledge, for the rural knowledge, for the agriculture. That is why we are trying to reinitiate rural reconstruction for the rural people. But the difficulty is that you cannot convince these local people, the parents. They want their kids go to the standardized education, go to the formal school because they can got job. If they learn the agriculture, they learn the local knowledge, they learn Hakka, they learn these minorities, cultures, whatever, they cannot have job. That is we said it's industrial capital to capitalize the education. That is the problem. Anyway, it's a good question. We can keep our discussions, and if you are interested in, you can join our movement.
It's a great invitation. Other questions?
Now it's a girl.
That was a girl, yeah.
I'm trying to make balance.
More qualified than you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm an architect and urban planner and have a small firm. And in the past, in the last few, I think the first few years when I just came back to China from US, I had a lot of large-scale community planning projects. And now, especially this year, somehow I got a lot of inquiries on eco park and new agriculture planning. And it's also, the size is very big, but I know in terms of zoning or urban planning, the FAR will be very low, and I want to keep it that way. It's just to do this new type of planning, master plan and concept, like agriculture concept. It seems like you're an expert. What's your advice on that, and what's the principle you think we as planners should follow?
2 days ago, I was in Tongji University to join a seminar. The title is the Design Philosophy. I suppose that if you want to learn something, you can go to the web and enter search. There are so many discussions about such kind of...
I'm from Tongji.
You're from Tongji.
Well, many years ago, and then I went to US.
Okay. And for me, that if you ask me to give a suggestion, I think that let me try to shout my suggestion. I think that let's remember one thing: social participation. Social participation.
Participation.
Yeah, the participatory design. Now it's a new trend of your
field.
Yes,
So
actually
just
that's my.
try to mobilize the local people, especially the rural people. They do have a very rich knowledge in the local affairs. And then ask them to contribute their knowledge for your construction design. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't need a mic. I can stand up. Thank you. Professor Wang, thank you very much. It's like a compressed 9-course meal into a very short dinner. But it's fascinating, and you talk about such great themes. So my question addresses two similar broad themes. And I know it's too big to talk in detail, but it seems these macro policies that China pursue are experiments in some ways. They try it and then they readjust. So a few years back, a macro policy was 城乡统筹, the city and the rural integration. And today there's a sort of another sort of theme, and that is 这个产城融合, the industry and the city harmonization. It seems the 城乡统筹, the one trend of that is shifting some of the industries from cities into satellite towns and creating sort of mono-industry towns, and that created an issue with towns being too sort of sterile because they're so monoculture. I wonder if that's a true interpretation, and at the same time, one creates empty cities that have no real job base. I'm just wondering how you see these big shifts in China's policy, trying to recalibrate that sort of the job issue, but also the townization, the urbanization issue, all of these macro issues. Where do you think your view of how we should address, or China should address these conflicts?
It's a too big question.
Big.
And I have no time to give you a full answer. I think let's just point out one thing. It's a so-called townization. 城镇化.
So,
城镇化 means townization. It's not urbanization. It's a townization is a trend of de-urbanization. Ordinarily, the 城乡统筹 means that it's you said separate towns and then move out these industries to there's not such kind of meaning. That means that you need to make the government's policy and the government's capital investment into the countryside. I said it's a second rebalance. To rebalance the rural and urban gap. Ordinarily, urban take too much, the rural contribute too much, and the rural get less social construction and infrastructure construction. So by such kind of 7 years, and the 7 trillion Chinese yuan means almost 1.2 trillion American dollars. By such kind of big investments, the rural-urban gap has been decreased. I mean, the gap is not large. So that is I said it's successful. Now turn to the townization means that in urban got too much investments. It's over investments. Now the town under the county level. In China we have 30,000. Including of these county town, the county center town, we almost have 40,000 towns. These towns now can be the big room for absorb this surplus capital. Means that if you keep investing into the lower town, means under the county, there still can absorb a lot of big surplus of the industrial capacity. So that is one. China cannot reinitiate the exports. China needs to turn to the local demand. The local demand facing the challenge of overproduction and
surplus of industry. So they need to find new room. That new room is town construction. So because town is many, so just now this lady said she got so many programs. Every local governments, they want to have a new program to build up, to invest into the towns. And for eco civilization, for eco construction, for a lot of things. Anyway, they use this new concept, trying to absorb big investments. That is the new trends. But at the back, what is the real problem? The real problem is that China now have a lot of big interest groups. If I tell you the truth, that the policy is now mainly influenced by the interest group, not by the scholar or by some policy think tank. That is a surface. They decide that, we do need to have suggestions, whatever. But indeed, it's much influential from the interest group. It's a cap interest group. Think about it, similar in the world. You have a financial capital interest group, we have. You have industrial capital group, we have. Different, no difference. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. Final question. That must be a girl, I guess.
You girl, give up.
Yeah, one person. Now we are going to be very strict about this. Other girls? Yeah.
No,
Yeah, you shout it out.
I can shout. Well, I have a very simple question. What can I do? What can I help as a young graduate? I want to help with countryside, but how can I help?
Good, very good. Very good. And you know that the rural reconstruction is a platform. Every people can free entry, free retreat. That's a popular democracy. Nobody control. I'm not leader. Nobody leader. We said we have no leadership, no headquarters, nobody in charge of fundraising, but everybody free entry. So if you do have ability, you are very much welcome to do whatever you can do as a volunteer. I think that you have done some observation to know that what we have done in rural reconstruction. Maybe that everybody, if here you are interested in, you can just read the web. In English one, we have an NRR, New Rural Reconstruction, not set up by us, by American scholars. And then if you read the papers, we have so many English papers, it's just a search in English. You can read what the situation, what we have done these things. If you are Chinese, you read there's also many. So we allocate a lot of experiment zones. And every small group, they do these works by their efforts. So I hope that certainly I believe that you are very capable. I hope you can be very active in such kind of big platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wen. Before I thank you and I invite you all to join me for a drink downstairs, I have some practicalities that I want to announce. Rural reconstruction is something we want to discuss next week. We have a speaker who has been leading the rural reconstruction, the physical side of it, how villages are being reconstructed in Yunnan province, and what kind of new paradigms there are for, let's say, preservation, and also the impact on tourism, or new potential paradigms for tourism actually, is something we're going to discuss next week. And I'm very excited about it actually, because I personally feel that tourism is one of the, might be one of the main drivers of rural development in the coming decades, in one way or another. Anyway, so that's next week, 7:30. If you're not yet on our mailing list, please leave your name card with me or with Vivian, and we keep you posted on our activities. All our lectures are AIA accredited. So if you write down your name over there, then your name will be sort of sent to AAA. Hisham takes care of this, so if you have any questions on AAA, please contact Hisham. And hope to see you next week, 7:30 here. Thank you very much.